Okay, welcome everyone. I'm glad to have you here this evening for our next class by Westminster's Peace and Justice Work Group. This class is in some ways a continuation of last week, where we talked about the violence issue in Wilmington. Last week we talked about some of the history of how the CDC report came into being and some of the progress that's been made and some of the things that have not been done since that report was issued. And we talked some about a new initiative to seek funding for some community-based programs. So tonight we're going to dive into more detail on that and see how the community can help support that effort to seek funding to truly fund a comprehensive community-based program. So I'm going to introduce Hanifa Shabazz, but we have more than one presenter this evening. So after that, she will introduce Gwen. So Hanifa Shabazz is a native Wilmingtonian who was born and raised on the east side of the city. She was educated in the Wilmington public school system, graduated from Wilmington High School, and continued her studies at Springfield College and Wilmington University. Hanifa was the first female president of Wilmington City Council. She was first elected in 2004 and served 3 terms as the representative of the city's 4th district, one of the most diverse districts in Wilmington. As city council person, Hanifa asked the National Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, to come to Wilmington to study what she saw as an epidemic of violence among young African-American men and youths who were dying at an alarming rate because of violence perpetrated with guns. She has been engaged with the resulting community advisory board ever since. So thank you, Hanifa, for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you our efforts that we have been diligently working on to address this epidemic since the CDC gave us their findings from their almost 18 months investigation. I know that you've seen the history of how we got to where we're going and to where our efforts to address this and to bring forth the recommendations that we, the Wilmington Community Advisory Council, which consists of about maybe 45 to 60 organizations at each meeting. So we did do a deep dive into what we felt needed to be done to address that, which you will hear more about as we continue the presentation. But I just want to share with you that there has been efforts done in trying to address the violence. There has been a policing effort that has been done, but I'd like to just give you some data to show since that effort where we are today with the effort that has been expelled and what we feel needs to complement that to be able to make a really impact on the violence and save our children. Already in the year 2021, we've had over 190 incidents of violence by gun. From that, there has been 183 individuals wounded. And that's individuals wounded because we have to understand that it's not just the individual who is wounded, it's the neighborhood, it's the friends, it's the family. So that number quadruples in the effect and impact of gun violence. Now, of those 190 incidents to date, as of October 13th, 64 individuals have died in this year. And I have to share with you, my friends, that of that 64, one of them was my grandson. So, and that of that number, 247 victims have been wounded, touched, traumatized even further from this continued violence. So that's clearly a demonstration that yes, we're doing something, but it doesn't show in the data that it is enough because the numbers have not changed. And so, I believe and feel very strongly that the Wilmington Community Advisory Council and its many members have put together a community-driven initiative to augment what the police and the public safety efforts have been taking place. But we feel that community impact, which we will present to you this evening, is essential to address this trauma that our young people are suffering from. So with that, I'll turn it over to Gwen.
Good evening, and it's nice to see you this evening. My name is Gwen Angelette. I am the coordinator for the Wilmington Community Advisory Council. And I've had I guess I would say the distinct honor of being able to work with the council since its beginning. And Lynn was a member of our core group at the beginning, and she's been with us the whole almost 5+ years now that we've been at this. So this evening, and some of you, I believe, were with us last week, you're going to get a little bit of a refresher tonight. It's not going to be a quiz or anything, but we'll give you a little bit of a refresher to kind of tee up a more detailed conversation about how we see this initiative on the ground, what kind of resources we think are going to be needed in order to support it. And then we want to pick your brain a bit, because we need to get more segments of the community out there advocating for this proposal in particular, but in general, to try to create a sense of urgency. We are troubled. We are very troubled that our elected leaders have not been more visible around, seeing the death that's occurring among our young people, the impact that this is having on them. And we keep wondering about, well, what else do we need to do to create a real sense of urgency? We want to pick your brain a little bit about that this evening, and make sure that we leave here with your questions answered, and any that we can't answer today, we certainly will follow up with you. So I am going to share my screen, and hopefully this is going to work well. I want this one, and I want this. Can everybody see my screen? Thank you.
Yes, perfect.
One of the things about the Wilmington Community Advisory Council is that we are a 501c3 now. We just became one, but we don't implement programs. We don't, provide services. We don't do that. As Hanifa mentioned, we are a collection, a partnership of many organizations, and several of those organizations came together to put this proposal together. We are functioning as kind of a shepherd to share it with the community and to try to get community engagement around it. But this is really a communal effort, if you will, a proposal that was written by, with, for our community. And at the centerpiece of this is the Center for Structural Equity, also known as the Community Intervention Team, and several of the partners of the council. See if I can. Last week, we reviewed this slide from the CDC report about what we've learned about the people that they studied who were committing gun violence. And there's a series of indicators here, which are, the young people that were committing acts of violence all shared. But one of the things that I really want to point out is if you go to the bottom part of the slide, you'll see a series of indicators around school, prior suspensions, expulsions, dropping out of high school, unexcused absences. Those are the leading indicators. The rest of these indicators up here are lagging indicators, but these leading indicators, we've got to pay more attention to, because they're the early warning signals, if you will, of when a young person is likely to drop out, if you will, stop going to school, and start to seek other ways to deal with their needs. When I say that, sometimes when young people don't feel affiliated with school, they're not connected to school, they're not connected to a youth organization, maybe things are not totally settled at home, then they seek other ways to connect. That's when there's a tendency or a possibility that they will connect with gangs. And gangs are very much a part of the culture in our community. It's a small number of young people involved, but it's making life challenging for a whole lot of our young people. We'll talk more about that in a little while. Oops, okay. No, there we go. Do it this way. When the CDC report was issued, there were 3 key recommendations. One focused on, actually 2 of them focused on trying to replicate the research that was done to come up with an early warning system to identify young people before they commit an act of violence and to get them the appropriate services that they needed to not go into crisis and stay on the right track. For a variety of reasons, most of which had to do with privacy rights, access to data, those first 2 recommendations, the state was not able to follow through on those for a variety of different kinds of reasons. But the 3rd recommendation was the creation of the Advisory Council. And the Advisory Council was not satisfied with just developing a report. It wanted to see that report get implemented. And we've been at it for 5 years, which means we're very tenacious. We don't give up because we care about our young people. This just gives you that snapshot that compares Wilmington to, look at the large cities that are on this list. And then look at the city of Wilmington. This is in 2017. You know, per capita, we have one of the highest gun rates, you know, in our country. It shouldn't be that way. It should not be that way. And we need to, as a community, to say, we won't stand for this and really get behind real concrete, dramatic action. Hanifa was talking about the most recent data, but here again, you see the history of shooting, you know, in over multiple years. And then the slide or the chart on your right is as of May 3rd, what the shootings had looked like for at certain specific periods of time. The point here is that if you think about the up and down motion of this, we've had lots of different mayors. We've had lots of people as police chiefs. We've had individual initiatives over this time. But look at this. It's not any better. It's really not any better. So it means that if we keep doing the same thing the same way, you know, year after year after year, we're going to get the same results, which is what we're getting. We got to do something different, something bold. And that's this proposal that we're talking about. In this community-driven proposal, one of the things that we really honed in on is Thomas App wrote a book called Bleeding Out. And in that, he reviewed evidence-based practices around the country that, you know, to try to talk about what does it take to really prevent gun violence. And some of what came out of that was that you can't just have one component of the model. It just can't be about the policing. You've got to really have the community. One of his main points was the community has to be involved in a complete public safety model. In order to have complete public safety in a community, the community has to be involved. They have to be an active player. And what we mean by this is that you don't have to have the police go to a neighborhood to maintain order. That neighborhood, you know, pretty much self-governs, and they are able to maintain order in that neighborhood. And police are, police are an occasional,
Sure. You say that for me.
Occasional presence. They're not a permanent presence.
Oh, wow. Here, I'll get it. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that.
If everyone would please mute if you have other conversation going. Thank you. The final part of this community-driven proposal is that we want to build stronger neighborhoods, because that's really what will help us to a complete a model or a model that really promotes public safety, community resilience, and that in turn helps our young people. Now, our main goals, of course, are to reduce violence. We will never eliminate violence. That's just the way our society is, but we want to reduce it. And we want to promote positive youth development. We want to build stronger communities. And a point about the positive youth development is that our young people are a collection of assets. It's up to us to help them to create environments in which they can develop those assets, that they can have positive interactions with other people, with role models, that they have opportunities to really grow and learn and see that they have potential, that they're worth something, and that they have value, and they are valued. Our approach is really looking at the intersection of three pillars. This is very much a comprehensive approach. You know, when we talked about the different programs that have been operating over the last several years, they've been in one component. They might have been a prevention program. They might have been an intervention program. There's very little in the area of early intervention. We're suggesting that we need to bring all those organizations together, those that are doing prevention, those that are doing early intervention, and those that are doing intervention. Universal, the definition of universal means that a young person, that relates to all young people. And there are a lot of our young people that are at risk just by virtue of where they live. But if we get a little bit of support, they're going to stay on the right track and they'll be successful. The other end of the spectrum is our indicated young people, those that are already in crisis. They may be active with the kids department. They may have been adjudicated, through the courts. They need help getting back on the right track. Then we have this group in the middle, our selected young people. Those are the ones that I was talking to you about before, that our school, where the schools are the leading indicators. Looking at those young people, if we don't get to them early, before they go into crisis, then they're going to end up in the indicated category. And right now, we don't feel like that they're getting enough support and in terms of the services that are available to them. And I'll give you an example. A few months ago, you might have heard, there was a lot of news press around 14 indictments of young people who were involved in gang violence in our city. And there was a lot of celebration about, oh, we got these 14 young people off the street. But what wasn't done was to go look for the young people that were, shall we say, the next layer down, so to speak. There were young people that were out there and became vulnerable because these 14 young people had been taken off the street. We had a shooting of a young person not long after that. That young person was somebody that was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that's what happens when you take out the upper layer in this gang hierarchy, if you will. The people that are left in the neighborhoods become much more vulnerable. The other part of our approach really gets into evidence-based practice. And we believe that the collective impact approach that we're using will help us to get better results because people will be working together and not at cross purposes. Using trauma-informed care, really knowing that our young people are traumatized, their families are traumatized by the violence that they live within, day after day. How do we help them to cope with that and to overcome that? We have skills for psychological recovery, and that's an evidence-based practice. It actually came out of the disaster relief that was done with in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. These are problem-solving skills. We propose to have the people that will be working in this program to be trained in that, and that they will be able to help people to identify the issues, the root issues that are really getting in their way, so to speak, and to help them to connect to resources that will help them to, again, get back on the right track. And then intensive case management. Some of the initiatives that are funded out there are funded for a specific period of time. You know, you might hear about a young person being involved in a program, and there's a specific length of stay that that program has been approved for that young person. They get the supports while they're in, you know, during that period of time, but when their time runs out, the program is over for them, whether they're really ready to be discharged or not. But this, and what we're proposing here, is to wrap support around the young people and to have it be for as long as it takes, and not to have artificial time constraints placed on it. Okay, and please forgive me, I'm still getting used to operating this with a mouse instead of my keyboard. So my back and forth gets a little out of whack sometimes. So key dimensions, we talked about the strategies around prevention, early intervention, and intervention. We talked about being implemented by grassroots organizations who are trusted in their communities and helping build on their strengths, build their capacity, and have them work together in a community of practice. Which means we have a lot of neighborhood mom and pop type organizations that have the trust of their neighborhoods. They can reach the young people where others can't. We're proposing to bring those groups together to work together in this initiative. And we talked about one of the advantages of this is that you can build the capacity of those organizations, and you can reduce the likelihood of duplication of effort. And of course, an important piece in this whole initiative will be to have a strong research and evaluation component to ensure that we are measuring our outcomes. Our thought here is to try this, to ask for funding for 3 years and to study the impact of this initiative over 3 years, to be able to say, you know, what works, what doesn't work, what could be better, and see and lay the foundation for it to be taken to scale. Okay, in terms of structure, the backbone of this proposal is the Center for Structural Equity. And I'm sorry that Daryl Chambers is unable to be with us this evening. He had a conflict, but I hope that we'll be able to have him come meet with you at another time. He has been the boots on the ground for this kind of work for many years. And he is one of the most knowledgeable people that I know, you know, working in this area. And he's got the trust of the community, and he knows what's going on. And he has a small group of people who are working with him right now. This proposal is really meant to help give him the capacity to really do what his organization is so capable of doing. He would be partnering with Network Connect, Stop the Violence Coalition, United Way of Delaware, the University of Delaware Partnership for Healthy Communities, and Minds in Motion. The United Way of Delaware would be in place to help the Center for Structural Equity to build out their management capacity. The University of Delaware would be the fiduciary agent for these resources. Minds in Motion is really our behavioral health consultant who would help making sure that the young people are being connected into the appropriate levels of service that they need to address behavioral health issues and substance abuse issues that may be impacting them. I think we've covered a good portion of this. Let's see, okay. In terms of the taking a little bit deeper dive on what would happen on the ground in each area. In universal strategies, we are really looking at building the capacity. We have a group of about 11 community organizations scattered across the city that have been providing safe haven support to young people over the years. We would propose bringing those organizations together to have them work together and to help them improve the evidence-based practices that they're using to engage young people. We would have someone who would be engaged specifically to write grants to help secure additional funding to support their work. And again, the major focus here is around prevention, prevention of substance abuse, prevention for bullying, a lot of the antecedents that ultimately can culminate in violence, or violence with a gun, I should say. In the selected category, we talked a little bit about the young people that are involved in this. Remember, these are the folks who are having trouble in school, and they're in the early stages. And if we need to get to them to help them before they go into crisis. These are group-based strategies that really focus on helping that young person to build out their assets and improving the environments with around these young people, and helping them to deal or handle or build their skills in specific areas. And in terms of the indicated, these are strategies where young people are at greatest risk. They're experiencing long-term challenges. We have a couple of initiatives right now out there called the Gun Violence Prevention Initiative and the Hospital-Based Intervention Initiative. We heard a little bit about them last time, but we feel that those types of initiatives need to be strengthened. They need to be integrated with the other two to really have a comprehensive approach where the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and that we can build a strong support system for our young people. Okay. In terms of the operational side of this, we talked about the 10 safe havens. The age range for at the universal level will be 10 to 17. Specific programs, social emotional learning, substance abuse prevention, more focused on reading and workforce development, and of course, arts and culture. You'll see that arts and culture is a part of each one of these components, because that's an important dimension in helping our young people. In the selected and in the indicated areas, the service interventions are very similar. What makes them different is the level of intensity. And we would hire 10 community members to be well-being ambassadors. They would work with 80 young people. The age range for the selected youth would be 14 to 18. We would have 2 educational advocates that would provide intensive support to make sure that these young people are connected to school, that they're making progress in school. We'd have someone who would be a workforce development professional, ensuring that the young people are get the workforce development skills that they need and are connected to employment. Education and employment are 2 of the most important aspects of trying to break the cycle of violence that young people are exposed to and may end up being engaged in. We would have 5 host sites for the selected young people to which these community well-being ambassadors would be assigned. And the same thing is true in the indicated area. What changes in with the indicated youth is we start to move now into young adults and to work with the 16 to 24-year-olds. Again, 80 young people at a time, with being connected to education and being connected to workforce development. The universal prevention component would be managed by Network Connect. And this is an organization that's running a variety of youth programs right now and doing them quite successfully in the prevention arena. They also operate we have a community well-being initiative that's focused on adults and children, and they are managing that initiative. We're borrowing from that concept to have well-being ambassadors in this initiative as well. The selected and indicated areas would be managed by the Center for Structural Equity, but all of them will be connected in one community of practice. Now we get down to the dollars. You know, a lot of time over the years, people have said to us, well, what would it cost to do this right? Well, we've come up with cost. $4.5 million per year, or $13.5 million over 3 years. That would fully fund all 4 components for full implementation. That means funding the infrastructure necessary in the Center for Structural Equity, and then each of the three pillars. If we could had to start with one in a phase one, if you will, that would cost us about $2.44 million or $7.32 million over 3 years. We would be focused there on building out the infrastructure for the Center for Structural Equity as the backbone organization. We would really use the bulk of the resources to support the early intervention services for selected youth in Pillar 2. And remember, those are the young people right now that we feel are falling through the cracks to the greatest degree because there's not the kind of organized, coordinated effort really focused on them. One of the points that Daryl often makes when we talk about this is a lot of the funding that's out there right now is small amounts of money distributed towards large numbers of organizations. And in some ways, when you don't give people enough money to do the program the way it was really intended to be operated, you set them up for failure. The funding we're requesting here is to set this up for success. For the 160 young people that will be served at any one time, and with the thousands that will be served through the prevention effort through the community centers. So you've seen this call to action. It hasn't changed since last week. We need you. We need all, it takes all of us, all people, all strategies, all sectors. You know, we've been at this since 2015, and some of us have been at it much longer than that, like Daryl and Hanifa. We need to make the investments that have not been made over time. And we need your help to figure out how do we reach other people in the community to stand up with us, get involved and help to promote this, to get our elected leaders to realize that this is as important as building a new building. You know, it really, really is. It's at least as important as that. In my judgment, anytime we lose a young person, you know, is a deep tragedy and a real loss for our community. So with that, I'm going to stop talking now. And I would really love to, you know, and Eve and I both would love to entertain your questions, hear what you know, your thoughts, your reactions, and we really treasure your feedback. So thank you, and the floor is open.
Gwen, I'll start off with a question. I know you guys have started doing some presentations to some of the decision makers about funding or stakeholders involved. Can you talk some about who you've already you know, reached out to and what reactions have been so far? You know, how are folks responding to this?
Well, we started our road shows in August, and we're 6 weeks into this. No, actually more than that, because it was near the beginning of August. So we're, 10 weeks into this. We have met with the cabinet secretaries for education, children's department, health and social services, the Department of Labor. We have met with the Attorney General's office. We've met with the City Council President. We've met with some members of City Council. We've met with the mayor. We have met with a few state legislators, not many. We need to do more there. Hanifa, who am I leaving out? Oh, the
county exec Matt Myers.
Yeah, we met with the county executive. And in terms of response, oh, I should also point out, we met with with Claire DeMattias, who is the special assistant to the governor, and she is in charge of developing the roadmap, if you will, for spending of the American Rescue Act funds that are coming into the state.
We also met with representatives from from Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester's office, who gave us direction as and language from the American Rescue Plan as to whether our initiative, which they had read and studied, was fundable. And they gave us, from their interpretation, that they felt that we should be able to receive funding for our initiative from those fundings.
The state is taking a little bit different tack on this. In other words, you know, a lot of times when federal programs come out, they will give a state or a community a whole range of options of ways they could use the money, you know, allowable uses. And then a lot of times states and local communities will pick from that list what they consider to be their local priorities. So in our state, what we understand from talking to the officials of the governor's priorities are really focused on capital projects, things that you know, can be completed within, you know, the 2 or 3 year time frame, you know, for spending of the resources. And even the most recent RFP that was issued by the state for nonprofits to apply for funding, it was for capital projects, not people infrastructure, capital infrastructure. And the kinds of things that we need are people. We need people to work with people. So in terms of responses, we've gotten indications from the mayor, the city council president, and the county executive that they are interested, but we have not gotten any formal commitments, you know, from them as of this time. We have a meeting coming up with the Department of Health and Social Services that looks promising, but we won't know really until after we have that meeting in that's coming up next week. So we remain hopeful, but I think we're going to need more support in order to kind of put this over the finish line, so to speak.
And I could add that I think from some of their responses that they feel that they're already, you know, some of the initiative push, the focus of what our initiative is presenting, they feel that they have in place is sufficient. But the data clearly shows that it's not. And again, especially with the young people who are the early intervention, there definitely is not. I mean, we've had some of our members working with young people who came and asked for advice and direction because they got young people who are saying that, you know, we're being pulled into gangs and we want to not go there. What can I do to help? And when you go to these initiatives that's already in place, their response is that the children have to already be adjudicated or already in the system. So our children have to stick their hand in a cookie jar and get smacked before you can help it, rather than say, let me get you a cookie and help you so you don't have to steal from the cookie jar. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help our young people before they get into the system. Because, you know, once you get in the system, you don't ever get out, and you're ruined forever. And, you know, as a former elected official, I really feel embarrassed of the lack of political will, that there's not more, especially with the numbers as they are. And forgive me, because I did quote the numbers that I quoted was from the state. I didn't give you the numbers for just Wilmington. And if I can, that data is there's been 96 incidents to date with 96 people wounded, 29 of them who have died, with, you know, a total of 125 victims. And that's just individuals, not families. You know, and I can share, I let everyone else talk because I get very emotional. So forgive me. But, you know, the new place for our young people to spend their time is at the cemetery. One day when you're riding, go through Silverbrook or through the cemetery on 13. That's where a lot of our young people are. Our children are hanging out there. They're taking their chairs and balloons and picnic baskets and their bottles, and they're laying on the grave sites next to their dead beloved ones, because my grandchildren and I are doing just that. So we have got to do something and to make this wrong right. These are babies. It's just our responsibility to make them an environment for them to grow and thrive. And we have not done that well. Not done that well.
I'd just like to say, first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. It's a devastating, horrible thing. And I'm very encouraged by everything you've put in place. I hope that the funding comes through. Just one thing that comes to mind, we had Jackie Means come a couple of weeks ago to our church, and she presented what she personally is doing, which, and she came from the same direction of, I want to get kids interested in education as a possibility, because the gangs are just sitting there waiting for them. And if they can get an excitement and a motivation and see themselves as, you know, possibly in her case, she's trying to get them to be excited about science and math and STEM topics. But she was saying the very thing that you're competing. You've got to get some other thing for them to grab onto, because the pull of these gangs is just so very strong. And I think what you're saying is, you want to get them before they're in trouble. You want to get them to have goals that and something pulling them a positive way. So yeah, I applaud your efforts. And I think, the more the better. I mean, she's just one person, and she's working on her education and trying to be an example of somebody who's, well, a role model that maybe hopefully some of these, especially young girls, she presents to everybody, boys, girls, anybody, but I think as many mentoring, youth mentoring possibilities of people who have resisted maybe the being pulled into gangs, and for those kids to be able to present an example and a lure that direction. I guess the Teen Warehouse tries to do some things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just throwing that idea out. I mean, because you got to have competition for the negative.
Mhm.
And you're exactly correct. And I know Jackie Means' program, I've seen it many times. She's doing a fabulous job. And it's those types of programs, and going into teen warehouses and our safe havens that are universal, that's going to address the universal population. And it's having the need for these host organizations and these community workers, ambassadors on the street to get those selected young people who are being, are not there to go into the community centers. How do we grab them and get them into the community centers to hear the opportunities that they have, that we have put forth for them? So this initiative does just that. It gives us the resources and the individuals to go after those young people that are not going to go into LACC, they're not going to go into the teen warehouse, and understand now that the things are so difficult on the streets that the children from the east side are not going to be able to walk across the bridge to go to the teen warehouse, because they're gun zones right now. The kids can't even leave their neighborhoods because of the indicated young people, what's happening, and they're fearful, and parents not even allowing them. So even having we would need teen warehouses in every pocket neighborhood to really be effective. And this initiative just that, it creates those host organizations, safe havens, that the young people would feel comfortable in going to this informal type of community center, talking to those community, being ambassadors that they have trust, that they trust, supported by our workforce development and educational professional to get them to the right place. And then we can get them feeling comfortable and trusting of an adult to go into the teen warehouse. But we got to get that intervention, the early intervention first.
Roger?
You mentioned that there were many organizations that are on the ground already. An astounding number, I think you said 45 different organizations were involved in all this. What's their take on your proposals, and are you getting buy-in or resistance, or people saying you're going to step on my source of funding, and they would be concerned about that? How does that all work? Is there some work that needs to be done in that area?
Roger, it's been really interesting. We've had, I guess, 2 major meetings of the council during the last couple of months. One at the start when we were putting the concept together, and then one when we had the concept flushed out. We presented this proposal to them on August 16th. We had about 60 people on the call. Now, our normal participation is probably like somewhere between 30 and 40, and we remember we've been doing this for like 5 years plus. We had 60 people on the call, and there was overwhelming support. In fact, one of the ideas that came out of that was one gentleman was saying, we should all gather on the steps of a building and have a picture taken with all of us to show our support for the fact that this needs to happen. It was just overwhelming, actually, about the amount of support. And the other thing that was interesting about it is people willing to get together, getting back to your point about, stepping on toes. When people see that they're valued and that, we can all share in this collective pie, and we're not setting one group up to compete against another group, but we're doing it holistically. And that's what this is about. Then they seem to be a little more comfortable with that. At least the ones that turned out for our meeting on the 16th of August. And Lynn, I think you were there.
Yes, I was.
In that meeting. We were kind of overwhelmed because we expected a whole lot more skepticism, but it wasn't like that. It really wasn't.
Well, I think, Lynn, you could testify too that in over the years, one of the theme perspective from the members of the WCAC has been that we are closing the holes in the net. Our collective work together is closing the holes in the net so our children don't fall through. As we create these host sites and do the outreach to these young people, you don't know exactly what their needs might be until we have had an opportunity to really get to know them. And I saw a question about the parents, and we have not left the parents out of this at all, because we know that you can't help the child without helping the family, with and which builds a resilient community. But we don't know what type of service that child might need. And because we have a resource of over 60 members and organizations, that whatever that child needs, there's somebody within the council that could provide that support. And having the resources to be able to support that grassroots organization, no matter how small or large their capacity might be, will help build capacity for the organization, as well as to provide the needed culturally intelligent service that young person, that young family would need. So we need all of our members' input, because we need access to all the different type of resources that are there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say of the, the groups that were there, everyone's very supportive and recognizes the need for this type of thing. I'll go on to share just my personal opinion about, stressing why this is so necessary. And I'm not sure others frame it exactly this way, but it helps me understand it. We all acknowledge through these other partners that are there and many partners that our church, Westminster, works with, that we know are doing good things to address that universal piece. We work with Urban Promise and the great, summer and after school programs that they have in addition to their small schools. We know what's having the Teen Warehouse and we're working with them. And there are those great kind of programs happening. But, when I ask Rob Prestowitz, who leads Urban Promise, and say, but what happens when you have one of your youth drop out? What happens? And he acknowledges they don't have the resources to track that person down. That just is one less person that they're able to continue helping. And so what I see as part of what's needed when we talk about this comprehensive approach is even within those universal strategies, we have lots of great groups doing good work, but if we're not better coordinated, there are still a lot of youth falling between the cracks, and we're not coordinated enough to identify when they are falling between the cracks. I mean, maybe that person that dropped out of Urban Promise is now going to Teen Warehouse. Yay, great. They're still, have a place and having needs met, but maybe they're not. And if these different providers are not coordinated in some fashion, we don't know. And that's where you get into some of these other strategies that are really needed, is for those folks who are not being served by those other programs that are running out there. That's the missing piece. And the hospital-based program is not going to pick them up, because the hospital-based program is, again, catching the ones after they're already deep into the system and getting shot out and have usually been, perpetrators themselves. Same thing with the police-based program that we heard about, the group violence intervention program. That's for folks who have already are well down that path and way into trouble. And these other strategies that are not resourced yet and have been so effective in other communities around the country are those who are identifying those whose needs are not being met by these other universal programs, if you will, and really focus on them heavily, recognize that they have such deep unmet needs, and help them have those needs met before they get to that place where they're either shooting others or getting shot themselves. And that's where, Delaware has just not stepped up the game and invested in those community-based programs to identify and work with those individuals. So, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
I had a question. Are they individually, the organizations that are working now, are they constrained from sharing names and places and data with the other organizations, or will this program kind of eliminate any of these little communication barriers between the organizations so that they can identify, you identify somebody and you track him and he's gone from your organization, or he moved 6 blocks away or whatever? Can you share all that data now, or is that, you mentioned some privacy concerns early on.
There certainly are those, Roger. What we hope is through in the selected pillar and in the indicated pillar, with the young people that we are working with those host organizations, that there will be that kind of data sharing agreement, those agreements among everybody in those working in those 2 pillars. When you start to reach out beyond that, then you'd have to, one thing you need to do, and this is where the parents come in, you can share any data as long as the parents will say it's okay. So it's incumbent upon all organizations to really, indicate to families what kind of data they might be sharing with others and make sure that that's okay. And that's the kind of agreement that would have to happen with in the universal area. Those kinds of agreements would have to be in place for people to share. But in the 2 pillars that we're talking about specifically, around selected and indicated, we would have well-being ambassadors working in those 5 host sites each. We could facilitate that kind of data sharing. And I want to just do a quick example that builds on Lynn's point. this summer, you may have heard about different organizations setting up learning pods for young people who are in hybrid learning situations or having all virtual learning programs going on. What happened with, and I used the one that was operated by Daryl Chambers through the Center for Structural Equity, they had a lot of middle school and teens that were going to their pod. And when they didn't show up, the workers there went and got them. They didn't let them just slip away. They went out and found them.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about here. It builds on exactly what Lynn was talking about. And that's what we intend would happen here. We wouldn't just wait for the young person to show up. We would find them and help them and find out what's going on, and and reach out to the family or whatever else it takes in order to help that situation.
Very strong case management would be done as well, because that's going to follow up, because that's what demonstrates to the young people that we care. Because if we just let them go, y'all didn't care. I didn't come and nobody even came to find out why. And the reason that they didn't show up might be a legitimate reason why, and they need more help. But the fact that those ambassadors went and knocked on their door to find out what their issue was, and possibly if there was an issue that needed to be addressed, provided support to help them, that there helped the bind of trust, that they got an adult that they could trust and that is there for them, that really cares for them. And that's what the young people need most, is to know that we care for them. We will go bend over backwards for them. We understand that life happens and that there's resources out there for them, because they're our future. They're our future. And if we don't invest in them now, do we have a future?
Susan?
Two things, actually. Where do you see churches and the message, the reason for churches to exist? Where do you think that has an impact in the lives of these youth today who are in these communities?
Well, there's so many churches in the city of Wilmington.
There are
so many.
all kinds. Mm-hmm.
All right. And, once I believe that the young person has the trust from one of the ambassadors to be able to share with them that, a church is a place to go. Because that's the first thing you just got to get it. You have to get them in there, and to
be safe.
It's a safe place. Some of the missionary programs that our churches offer, that it is a place that you can go. That's part of the trust that we have to build to our young people. And then hopefully they go in there, they hear a word that touches their spirit. When we talked about art and culture, bringing art and culture to our young people, that there is where we're going to touch something that, that's innate in them, so that they see that the church is a place for them to go. It is a reprieve where they can go. It is a place that they can hear a word that gives them some wisdom and some guidance. We hope that churches will be there, but we got to get them. We got to get the children to come to the safe havens. We got to get them to trust the ambassadors, and then the church will be the next step.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Gwen.
I should say one of our partners, Stop the Violence Coalition, is really, several churches are involved with that coalition. And, it's about those churches who have active youth ministries or outreach efforts going on. And so Stop the Violence has been one of our partners, and would continue to help us to engage more churches, from that are in the different neighborhoods. I'm sorry, Lynn, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. I'll just add, again, going back to these, model programs from, the evidence-based programs from around the country. When we talk about the intensive case management, where you're looking at the whole person, those models all look at all the different parts of someone's life, whether it's the academic, if they need a job, but it also includes, their psychological health, their physical health, and their spiritual health. So the spiritual component is a part of all those comprehensive models. So when we're going to focus comprehensive services on someone, really work with the whole person, that spiritual part is part of it. And for some people, that may be helping them to reconnect with whether it's a church or some other faith-based institution that they had been connected with in the past, but had not been. Some of them, it may be finding something new that they've never had a connection with, but it is finding a way to feed that spiritual side as well, because that's part of the overall health picture.
Right, good point, very good point.
Hanifa, I think you mentioned earlier about wishing that it would be great if every location where some of these individuals are hindered would have a place like, the Riverside or something like that. Are there opportunities? Do you see opportunities where community centers or something can be built in these organizations or in these locations?
Well, yes, if you look at where a lot of the high crime is, there's a community center already. I mean, like you have PAL for the Northeast part of Wilmington, you have LACC, you have West Center City, you have Southbridge Neighborhood House, Weston Neighborhood House. The only East Side does not have a functioning community center in the People Settlement. But again, those are some of the places where our universal children will go. What we are suggesting in our initiative is that we also build up some host locations as well. That's kind of unorthodox, out of the way, right I call it in the muck. And just an example of what I'm talking about. When I grew up on the East Side, we had a clubhouse, and one of our community leaders had a building, and that's where we went. Even though I had the People Settlement, I had the Water Street Y, but there still was just a place that we could go and just be teenagers. And it wasn't as strict with all the rules as the other places would have, but we had, in those places, we had older mentors who were there to talk to us and give us direction that you might not get in some of the more, major Main Street type of locations. So having those kind of places, we feel are essential. I mean, right now, the Center for Structural Equity serves as a hub and for young people to meet, which is out of the way, and the young people come there rather than going to some of the structural community centers. So that is the plan. That's also written in the plan, as to see that we do need these types of places, maybe a vacant property that we want to ask some of these developers to go in and fix up, so our children can have a clubhouse or a tea house until we can get them feeling comfortable to go out into mainstream and go into the other facilities.
So does that include Kingswood Community Center? What the places you listed? Yeah, and so I was so impressed to visit Teen Warehouse. It was very spontaneous, no like appointment or anything. And these two young girls took me around that Teen Warehouse to every nook and cranny of it, and they were so delightful and so knowledgeable about how everything had been done there. I was just so amazed. And Logan Herring, of course, has been put a lot of energy into the Teen Warehouse and Kingswood Community Centers. I just want all these things to succeed. I'm so impressed with the young people themselves. These were like 14, 15-year-old girls, two of them, that walked me around that place with just so much pleasure and so much knowledge about how everything worked. It's a wonderful place. And now I'm hearing you say that it's a troublesome place because even getting there is troublesome.
Well, it's not a troublesome place. I don't want to misclassify it. It is a beautiful place and wonderful for our children. It's trouble for the children that are not in that immediate area. Like I live in Southbridge. So if the youth in Southbridge wanted to go to Teen Warehouse, they would have to walk across the bridge through the east side to get to the teen warehouse. That's a dangerous journey.
Isn't that awful? Oh my
That's a dangerous journey. So do we create buses to take the children over there? And then when you get there, we hope that there's not territorial issues. I'm from
Yes.
Southbridge. We have that
Yep.
issue. So
Yep.
we have to meet our children where they are. To us, it makes sense that this would work, but we have to meet our young people where they are, accepted or not accepted, because this is their reality.
Yes.
And we have to deal with them on their reality until we can help them see a different reality. But right now, we have not done very well. Remember, the children of Wilmington through DSEG were the only children who were forced to leave the nest before they could fly. They could walk, they could talk. They were sent to a strange area to be educated. And so this is the children of those children, because we talk about the parents. These are the children of those children.
Mhm.
And so we've created a generation of disconnected, disenfranchised young people who have not done anything wrong but to be born on the wrong side of the tracks.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here. I'll try to end on a positive note by saying that actually Teen Warehouse is looking into transportation to get youth from other sections of the city to the Teen Warehouse. So I'll end on
Yeah, I know that.
a note. And now I'm going to channel some Sue Linderman here. And I know she does a really strict job of trying to make sure we end at least by 8:15. We're supposed to try to cut off at 8. We give ourselves 15-minute cushion. So we do need to bring it to a close. I'm going to stop the recording